History is not only written by the great titans and the colossal empires they command. Sometimes, an entire evolutionary lineage stakes its destiny on a single, bizarre idea.
We see lineages built on speed, on armor, or on sheer predatory power.
But one dynasty, the Pachycephalosauridae, built their legacy upon the skull itself.
Now, let us open the chronicle and chart the rise and fall of this great dinosaur dynasty.
Our story begins not with the great domes of popular imagination, but in the shadow of giants.
We are in the early Cretaceous of Asia, a landscape dominated by towering sauropods and formidable theropods.
Here, in the cluttered forest undergrowth, the progenitors of the dynasty were small, swift, and unremarkable. These were bipedal herbivores, likely no larger than a hound, relying on speed and camouflage to survive. They belonged to the greater clan of Homalocephale, the margin heads, cousins to the emerging horned ceratopsians. But while their cousins began investing in elaborate neck frills and facial horns, this lineage took a different path. Here, the fossil record, though fragmented, reveals the first crucial adaptation. When we examine the skulls of early members like Acrotholus or related forms, we do not see a massive dome. Instead, we find a subtle, modest thickening of the bone, particularly along the posterior roof of the skull. This was not yet a weapon, it was a signal.
This initial investment in cranial bone was likely for display, a way for individuals to recognize their own kind, or establish a visual hierarchy.
It was a simple evolutionary statement, but it was the seed from which an empire of bone would grow. These humble architects were laying the foundation for one of the Mesozoic's most extreme biological experiments. That humble foundation of thickened bone, laid down in Asia, proved to be an extraordinary evolutionary success.
For millions of years, the dynasty refrained in the shadows, but as the late Cretaceous dawned, new opportunities arose. Land bridges connected the great continental landmasses, and members of this lineage embarked on a great migration.
They crossed from their Asian homeland into the vast, rich, hothouse world of Laramidia, what is now Western North America. It was here, in this new and fertile continent, that the Pachycephalosaur dynasty would enter its golden age.
The simple, thickened skull of their ancestors was now the raw material for an explosive period of evolution.
This was the dynasty's zenith, a time when they perfected their signature trait and radiated into a gallery of bizarre and magnificent forms.
We find the classic expression of this lineage in creatures like Stegosaurus.
Here, the skull was no longer just thickened. It was a high, smooth, solid dome of bone, several inches thick.
This was a complete cranial reorganization, a biological battering ram that defined the family.
But this dynasty was not content with a single design. Natural selection, acting as a master artisan.
The fossil record of Laramidia reveals a spectacular array of spikes, nodes, and knobs that began. For decades, we paleontologists identified these highly decorated skulls as distinct species. Dracorex hogwartsia, the Dragon King, with its flat, spiky head,
and Stygimoloch spinifer, the thorny river devil, with a small dome and dramatic, goat-like horns erupting from its rear.
Today, however, the evidence strongly suggests a more profound and elegant story. When we analyze the bone histology, the microscopic structure of the fossils themselves, we believe we are not seeing a crowd of different species,
but the life story of a single, great ruler. Dracorex and Stygimoloch are now largely considered to be the juvenile and adolescent growth stages of the dynasty's absolute apex.
Its skull was a fortress of bone, nearly 10 inches thick, and a solid, dense mass, fringed by a crown of blunt, intimidating horns.
The purpose of this extraordinary structure has been at the very heart of the dynasty's chronicle.
Was it purely for show? A costly, vivid signal of health and strength? A biological billboard advertising genetic quality to mates and rivals?
Or was it a weapon? When we study these domes, we find pathologies, healed fractures and compressed lesions
that strongly suggest they were used in violent, high-impact encounters.
The internal structure, a dense mesh of bone fibers, seems perfectly evolved to absorb and dissipate immense force. The most likely answer is that it was both.
Like the antlers of a great stag, the dome was a symbol of power that, when challenged,
Had to be proven in brutal, head-to-head combat.
this dynasty had forged its identity, its entire social structure, upon this cranial weapon. This golden age, this spectacular flourishing of cranial architecture, was concentrated in the dynasty's greatest members, including the Emperor Pachycephalosaurus itself, stalked the floodplains of the famous Hell Creek Formation. But this was no paradise. This was a proving ground, an arena of giants. And it would be the setting for the dynasty's great trial. By specializing so heavily, by staking their entire evolutionary strategy on their skulls, the Pachycephalosaurs had locked themselves into a high-stakes ecological niche.
Their world was a landscape of intense competition.
To survive here meant to live alongside the most advanced and formidable dinosaurs that ever evolved.
The Hell Creek ecosystem was ruled by the ultimate predator, Tyrannosaurus rex, a tyrant that preyed on the unwary and the weak.
The dominant herbivore was not the domehead, but the mighty Triceratops, a contemporary from their own Margillian clan,
Who had taken a different evolutionary path, investing in shields and spears of bone rather than a battering ram.
And a new kind of rival, the hyper-intelligent and swift Dakotaraptor, hunted in the same spaces. And their signature adaptation, the dome, offered no defense against a predator like T-Rex. It was an intraspecific tool, a device for social combat within their own kind, not a shield against the Titans.
Their survival depended on avoiding these giants, on finding purchase in the gaps left by the more numerous and powerful herbivores.
But the true trial was not a single predator or a rival. It was the world itself.
As the Maastrichtian age progressed, the very climate was becoming more unstable.
we see evidence in the rock record of fluctuating sea levels and a changing climate.
Which placed immense stress on the flora that these specialized herbivores depended on.
Their world was becoming harsher, the resources scarcer, and the competition more ferocious. Their dynasty, forged for dominance within its own ranks, was now struggling against an entire ecosystem that was itself under siege. And then, the sky fell. The great trial that would test every dynasty on Earth was not a rival, but an asteroid. The Chicxulub impactor struck the planet, unleashing a global cataclysm that no evolutionary strategy could withstand. The skies darkened, the plants died, and the food chains collapsed from the bottom up. For a specialized herbivore in an already stressed environment, this was an insurmountable catastrophe. The very world that had elevated them to their golden age had now become their executioner.
The cataclysm was absolute.
Had no defense against a global winter. The sun was blotted out by ash, and the complex plant communities they relied upon vanished almost overnight.
The great trial had become an extinction.
They fell to starvation and cold, their magnificent cranial weapons rendered utterly meaningless in a world that no longer had rules.
With their demise, the entire lineage was severed from the tree of life.
They left no avian descendants to carry their genes into the New World, as some of their theropod contemporaries did.
The finished story. Their legacy is not one of servile, but of audacity.
It is a chronicle written entirely in bone, a testament to one of evolution's most singular and focused pathways.
When we unearth one of their magnificent skulls, we are not just holding a fossil. We are holding the emblem of an entire lost empire. They stand as one of the most striking examples of how natural selection, given millions of years,
Can sculpt a creature around a single, baffling, and spectacular idea.
The chronicle of the Pachycephalosaurus, like all great dynasties, is ultimately a story of impermanence. It serves as a profound reminder that specialization, the very key to a lineage's golden age,
Can also be its undoing when the world itself is rewritten. Their fossils are a silent testament to an epoch of biological creativity that we can now only visit in our imagination.
a world of bizarre and beautiful forms that rose, reigned, and vanished, leaving only their story etched in stone.